Welcome
All
to
right.
Ensuring a Reliable Digital Experience this Black Friday with Dan Giordano. A web developer turned developer marketer, Dan has over a decade's experience building and growing open source tools and services like Swagger, Jenkins, Selenium, Gatsby, and others. As the Senior Director of Product Marketing here at Applitools, he enjoys translating the benefits of new technologies to businesses of all sizes. And with that, Dan, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Pam, and thank you everyone for attending today. We are excited about today's webinar, ensuring a reliable digital experience this Black Friday. And what we'll be talking about today is we'll talk about the unique challenges of e-commerce testing, some of the common kind of solutions of how we're doing that today, and then really how Applitools can help. And then we'll talk about some different testing personas that'll help build scenarios and help get us through, I think, finding those unique edge cases in e-commerce testing. All right, so the challenges of testing e-commerce applications, we have a few down here. We're going to talk about a couple of them in depth since they really hit upon what Applitools is solving for. But a lot of this is going to revolve around the front end. So obviously we have things like performance testing and load testing, things like that obviously are super impactful. Today, for the most part, we'll be talking about functional challenges and visual challenges, as well as accessibility things around the UI of an e-commerce site. So the first challenge here we're going to talk about is data-rich testing scenarios, and the fact that data and kind of user state is a huge aspect of e-commerce. Adding things to a cart, going through with different users, with different amounts, different information based on their scenarios, all that are just make the testing paths exponential in number. There are a lot of different ones, and you'll see that we have somewhat of a framework to get through them. But a lot of data when we're going through e-commerce, and again, we don't mean data by just hard numbers, but a lot of different testing scenarios and states based on product information and buyer information. The second one here is multi-browser testing or multi-screen browsing. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about the proliferation of shoppers testing on different browsers on desktop, different mobile devices, using both of them in tandem to make purchases. So maybe they see an item on their mobile device, they add it to their cart, but then they're actually going to purchase it on their desktop. All these kind of different screens and the omni-channel experience makes testing e-commerce scenarios really difficult as well. A third challenge here is A/B experimentation. This is huge for any team that works closely with their business, right? Their marketing and product teams that are wanting to run experiments on their application or on their e-commerce website. And these experiments are challenging in twofold. The first is that oftentimes the logic built around it is difficult. The A/B test itself has a logic to it. The test will have to mimic that logic and understand the context of the application. And all of those create just, again, a unique set of circumstances for A/B testing. A/B testing of the test. The third thing, or the other part that makes this difficult, experimentation in general, is that you're creating a very permanent, or you're doing the work of a permanent test case for something that may be very fleeting, right? So your development team, your product team is working on this experiment that then gets developed and needs to get tested, right? So you're spending hours, spending a day creating a test scenario for this experiment, only to have the experiment, let's say, fail miserably on the first 2 days in production, and then it goes away forever. So you've just kind of wasted time. And again, everything needs to be tested to a certain extent, but A/B tests are certainly a real problem child for QA teams. Since again, you only have a finite amount of time, and you can only test the things that you think are going to stay in production for the longest. And unfortunately, these things are important for they can provide huge uplifts and conversions and purchases for those product teams. So there's a lot of pressure on QA to make sure they're properly tested. Another challenge of e-commerce is localization, more so than maybe a banking application or a SaaS application. Localization with languages, e-commerce tends to be ubiquitous. There are a lot of global markets, a lot of vendors that sell online in many different countries. The need to test across languages is both a requirement, but also very difficult to test. Again, you not only the resourcing is difficult to find people that know the language and build those test cases, but also it's kind of like the browser problem where we start to enter into a multiplication challenge of each time that we want to add a language to our test suite. We're going to have to create new tests. We're going to have to create or maintain these new tests. And we're going to have to do that across not only our main browser, but all the other browsers. So there just starts to get a wide range of scenarios, and localization definitely brings in more. Fifth problem here, and this one's going to be kind of interesting and new to a certain extent, is post-production content. So what do we mean by post-production content? What we mean here is we're talking about content that enters into the application state after a CI/CD process has maybe been enacted, or post the development process. So for e-commerce, a lot of times that happens with things like shopping CMSs and really, again, these like ERP systems where there is a business analyst, maybe a buyer, that is entering in information, entering in content for a new product line, a new shoe just dropped, so it needs to be added. A lot of times that will happen outside of the development process, and you'll need to create a set of tests that are able to be flexibly kicked off, monitored across not only, again, the development side of the content, so changing layouts and things like that, but small aspects of the content that might change without triggering a CI/CD build. And again, those happen with systems like Shopify that are ran headlessly. You'll often see this happen more and more. Marketing banners are another great example, right? A banner at the top of a screen. That content, all that it can be and is oftentimes driven by a marketing team that is not really privy to, again, like the development or QA process. They're adding a new headline or a new percentage that they might not see that, hey, it truncates on a smaller screen. So now you went from one line to two lines and it breaks everything else because it's at the top of the screen. All those problems are really difficult, and e-commerce, because there tends to be a lot of different teams working on them, it's certainly a big challenge for them. Lastly, here is customer-generated content. What we mean here mostly is reviews. And again, this is around the same challenge space as the post-production content, but a lot of things will change on the screen after your CI/CD process is ended. So after your development, after your production build gets shipped, there are still snippets of JavaScript. There are still pop-ups that can happen, either, again, by your own internal team, and we'll call that more post-production, or the customer-generated part of it, which are reviews and things like that. So all of these aspects, I think, come together and create a really difficult environment for testers when they go to validate e-commerce applications. You can see here kind of a good example of a single screen and all the different issues that can arise from it. There's hundreds of elements that are visible. There's accessibility issues that aren't going to be caught, again, by regular functional testing tools. There's dynamic content. So traditional visual testing tools don't always work as content is changing a lot. There's personalized content. There's usability errors. There's just a lot of aspects of testing. Even just, again, the single front-end homepage of an e-commerce company like Amazon. And the traditional way to test is really just hundreds of shoulds around that interface, right? You have that experience, and what we're doing in most cases is, and this is all pseudocode for the most part, is just grabbing what we deem as the most important aspects of that experience, a buy now button, a shopping cart label, the product image itself, and we're manually creating really tech debt for us. So we're creating and testing by hundreds of shoulds that can instantly change on a large team. So again, either from a CSS aspect and reusing components on the development side, or on the post-production side with marketers, with product managers being able to change out aspects of the UI without really even development or QA being privy to it. So all of it is just a very unreliable aspect, which is why Applitools invented visual AI and is trying to rebuild. There we go. Rethink how we're able to go test these applications. And e-commerce is a perfect example of that because visual AI is so flexible in what we can test. It not only just does simple visual testing, but it allows us to do accessibility testing. It allows us to do aspects of functional testing. And it even brings in things like multi-baseline testing and root cause analysis, which are just small features that we'll talk through a little bit when we get to our demo. So without Applitools, we have a ton of shoulds that really, again, need to drive up our tech debt. They need to be maintained. And with Applitools here on the right, we have a simple check with visual AI. And we'll see actually in our demo live how easy it is and how impactful it is to bring this snapshot into the Applitools dashboard. You'll see we can create really dynamic test cases without needing to know how to drive automation from a development standpoint, but also just being able to do it in a more human-driven way. Not so much machine, not so much code, but really how the user sees the application. So let's talk now a little bit about solutions and solution set around a faster way to test e-commerce applications. And this will be, for the most part, product agnostic. We'll simply, a lot of these will go through just how we think of, again, thinking about test cases and scenarios and building a framework for that. So first, we want to talk about these three. We'll talk about methods, kind of methodology of front-end testing. You'll see these commonly, different words, but we are firm believers in doing testing in this kind of layered approach. The first aspect over here is component testing. This is big with e-commerce as well because of the repeated nature of the application. So we'll actually go through most of our testing today on a single product page. But because of templating and because of design systems, that is oftentimes 80% of the rest of the application, right? So like you're testing the same button that is being called from the same component system. And obviously there's things that we need to test for each product, but it really helps out when we do component testing. It's basically the unit testing of front end. So we're able to do really fast atomic testing of a component, but it lacks context of the entire application. So if we were able to only do component testing, we would still have errors slip to production since those components, when they sit next to each other, when they interact with each other, it still leaves room for bugs and errors to occur. Next up is smoke testing. This is kind of just on the web. We'll talk like really simple linting, simple crawling of URLs, making sure that they return 200, status okay. So again, it is the fastest, most possible way to test. I think for a lot of multi-page application e-commerce sites, things where like Shopify, that URLs are getting uniquely created, query parameters are getting uniquely created. There's a lot you can actually do from a validation standpoint, both locally and in test environments, to just continually make sure that all of your products are showing up okay. Again, it's the fastest possible way to kind of give yourself pretty good coverage. The last is more of kind of that final tip of what is considered the testing pyramid. And that's end-to-end tests, right? Testing around specific scenarios. But even those have challenges itself, right? End-to-end scenarios are you have to experience them to understand them. So you can only test for what you know. Maybe common bugs that come up in customer tickets, maybe problem areas that you see while you do exploratory testing. Those are the scenarios that you're most likely going to test. Also, you can run those again, or well, they're finite in nature because of the time it takes. So when we go up against localization, when we go up against cross-browser testing, things like that, we can only run so many scenario tests. So we need to make sure that they're the most important and a way to maximize them, which again, we'll talk about a little bit with visual testing. We can certainly maximize our cross-browser testing, our localization, in a way that just really isn't possible with functional testing prior to this. And we want to follow Pareto's law. We want to test the most impactful aspects of your e-commerce experience. So 80-20 rule, 20% of your pages, 20% of your templates are going to drive 80% of your actual revenue. So it's really important to just worry about the most important 20% of your application, which e-commerce, luckily, it's the only break we get. A lot of those happen to revolve around things like the homepage, category pages that again build off templates, individual pages of the product IDs. These are the most numerous, but again, when you're basing off design system components, they're going to be very common in nature. The shopping cart, so your checkout system, and then search and filtering. So it's like your basic aspects of an e-commerce site. When you start to drag it out and you start to put all of them and even look at them in this kind of easy graphical way, you start to see that, hey, we're testing a lot of the same things. We just need to make sure that we can either use data-driven testing to make sure we're getting the most scenarios, or cross-browser testing, again, take those same 5 things and apply them to all the experiences that an end user is getting. Visual testing can kind of combine all of those aspects. It can do the localization, it can do the cross-browser testing all at the same time in just a much faster way. So the next 5 minutes, we'll talk about our framework of testing personas. This is an easy way for, I think, beginning to create our testing cases and think about all the different edge cases of testing e-commerce applications. So we have the peruser, the social buyer, and the slowpoke. These are just, again, personas thinking about the end user and a great framework on asking yourself questions of what needs to be tested to better supply them with proper coverage. So the first one, the peruser, who are they? This is really the shopper that is using the brand to find items, right? So they know that they want to go to a website or a brand like Lululemon. They don't quite know what they need. They just know that they want to buy on that website in particular. They're going to go through the different categories, maybe see the bestseller items, see what's new. They're going to take their time and really stress test your entire application. This is from an 80-20 perspective, depending on your analytics, this actually might be a low pure number of shoppers, but they're important because they do cover a pretty wide range of edge casing. So again, with all of this, we want to take a firm look at your analytics, make sure we're testing the product and shopping items that get viewed the most, impact our revenue the most, and then also look at things like pages per visit, right? That's going to tell us if we are a perusal website or more of a direct buyer, so the social buyer. So this is the flip side of that persona. These are direct buyers. They're going to be coming from maybe a social media app like Instagram or Twitter. They're going to see an advertisement and really buy directly. Again, it's not only the end user that's going to dictate this. A lot of times it's the type of application, right? Are you a direct-to-consumer app or e-commerce company, or do you sell things in a really quick manner from advertising? So is a normal purchase made within 5 minutes, 2 screens. It really is derived from your own business model and your own analytics. But the social buyer is definitely someone who's growing in frequency or persona. And again, kind of the entire market that's been built around social ads is huge for testing. So does the experience coming from the social media app, is it poor, right? And like, are there a ton of pop-ups that come up? Are there inhibitors to actually making the purchase or clicking the button? These are things that maybe from a peruser standpoint don't need to be tested as directly, because a lot of times they will slowly click away pop-ups or accept cookies on the homepage, but that didn't block the specific shopping experience. The social buyer that's much more direct, it is very important to test those 5-second experiences where you're coming from a page with a referral cookie and you're landing on a shopping experience, that you need to make sure everything is present without inhibitors. And lastly, here we'll talk about kind of the slow poke. So this is really like the peruser. This is even more exaggerated in that they will add things to a shopping cart. They will have a login experience, so they will make sure that they are members of your e-commerce application. They might click on an email that you send them for a shopping cart buyback. They might, again, look at something on a mobile device, go back on their desktop, add things over time to your shopping cart. So these people will really stress test the different scenarios that need to be tested and the state of your application. So this is what we were talking about before. It's not just static content. It's really all about the different ways you can find edge cases around shopping cart experiences, and just the buying experience itself. So the quick time it goes from landing on a product page to actually putting that thing in your shopping cart, that entire scenario, the slowpoke is really going to put a lot of pressure. All right, so those are our 3, I think, personas that you can always kind of jot down when a new feature comes out on your e-commerce. We need to make sure that we're writing test cases around them. All right, we've done some slides now. About time for a live demo, what we've all been waiting for. We're going to be covering kind of these 3 things in our live demo. A lot of it will be pseudo kind of scenarios. We'll be using Cypress and Applitools to run our test cases today. So if you use Cypress, feel free to use the test code. We will be putting all the example information up on a Git repo. I actually don't have it right now, only because you'll see the API key is stored in it. So we'll talk about that a little bit. It's a security thing. But you will get access to this. You will have access to an e-commerce app as well, a demo app, which is really great for kind of a playground. It's a Gatsby front end running on Vercel. You can run it on any really modern website or modern hosting platform. It doesn't have CI/CD built in right now, but you'll kind of see as we'll go through. This is a pretty applicable pseudo example of some regression testing. So without that further ado, let me stop sharing this. All right. So we're going to be in a couple different states, but let me get this up for you. Everyone bear with me. All right. So today, this is the application we're going to be testing. It's the iStore. It is a multi-page application. Again, it's a static application. It's a solid example of a React front-end React e-commerce website. And we'll be testing actually this product page itself with Applitools with Cypress. We'll be going through changing a few different aspects of the content, of the colors, and go through that. And then we'll also see some accessibility testing. So just to get everyone familiar with kind of the screens I might be going through with this, I have our Git repo. I have our Shopify backend. So this is the Shopify CMS that actually creates the content itself. And then I have it hosted on Vercel. So you'll see deployments when we go through and rebuild the application to make changes. You'll see that. So it will take about a minute in between each change. So I apologize upfront for the little bit of lag, but I do think it's important to kind of see how everything works in a live scenario and how quickly, again, with a CI/CD system, this would all be very much automated. All right, so let's do it. The other thing that we're going to be looking at, obviously, is our code. So again, like I said, we're using Cypress. So we have Cypress installed project. I can show you here. Let's look at our Cypress config file. We have our Applitools config file. Again, the API key is here. I'm going to scroll down a little bit so we don't all hit that. You have to put that in not a lot of times. You should not hard code that into your test project. I have it here for ease of changing for these demos. But the Applitools config file is also going to be your place where we can edit the batch name, change out configurations for browsers, which is what I have here. So you'll see each test we run today, it's actually going to be run against 3 different browsers, a Chrome browser, a Safari browser, a Firefox browser. We can also change the viewports, and we can also run against, obviously, mobile devices as well. But right here, we'll just kind of keep, for the most part, a lot of this simple with 3 different devices. All right, so again, to show what we're going to test is this product page here. It is the huge succulent planter pot page. And you'll see there are various amounts of elements on here. And we have our test cases. Let's look. Sorry. All right, so yes. This is a test case example, a Cypress test case with the old way, right? Without visual testing, where we would have to declare all these different aspects of the page itself. And again, all these different, we have 4 different aspects of the page here, only 4 different ones. The category should be visible, a few different words in the description itself. But really, there's only 4 pieces here. And over time, that would change, and we'd have to maintain that. But what we're going to show you here is eyes check, and that we're only making this check window call. So we're visiting the URL, we're making this single check window call, and that's going to upload a snapshot to Applitools Eyes, where we can start creating a baseline and really testing against it. So let's do that now. Let's run that test. So Cypress, actually, it doesn't need to be open. Here we go. All right, so I'm just going to run this test. Again, everything here is kind of a one-off. You can certainly incur this in your CI/CD, but just want to keep it pretty simple and pretty applicable to, I think, a lot of different scenarios in the e-commerce world. All right, so that's all done. We've taken our snapshot, we've uploaded it. Let's go check it out over here in the Applitools dashboard. All right, so this is the latest one. You can see everything is passed, which is awesome. So we had our baseline here on the left, and then we have our checkpoint on the right here. And we've got all green. So nothing has changed between the two, which is awesome. But now let's make some changes and see kind of how Applitools goes about updating that, or how Applitools goes about identifying changes and then updating those. So right here, we're going to show a change to actually, and I can zoom in so everyone can see this a little bit better. We're actually going to change this login button text. So this text is going to change from add to cart to buy button. So we'll do that via right here. Again, templating is really powerful in a lot of modern JavaScript e-commerce sites. So right here, this is our text, add to cart. We'll change this to buy now. Save that. All right, so now Let's start that build. Let's make this change. Buy now text. All right, so this is again going to take about 45 seconds. We can go over here and just check. Okay, so kicked off. And we start looking. In the meantime, one thing I do want to talk about that we'll actually show is the baseline things we were talking about before and A/B testing. So let's say this was a A/B test, the buy now change. What we can do is actually we can add in a variant. So here, actually we already had one, so this is perfect. Our default is this entire baseline, right? So baseline variation, create new. When we make this change, an easy way we can do experimentation is we can actually just create a new baseline and we'll add to it. So when this uploads, we'll make part of that happen. It should be done. Perfect. All right, so let's just make sure. All right, you saw add to cart, now goes to buy now. We're going to come back to our test. We're going to run this again. We should get a problem. We'll get an error after comparison. And we'll actually get it both ways. We'll get it in the Cypress dashboard right here with a little bit of a call out. And then obviously in the eyes dashboard, which will work too really here. All right, perfect. So eyes caught our problem. It's unresolved right here. This is what happens when something is changed and not specifically different than something that was deemed a failure. So again, we have a baseline, and this is just a change. So let's see what changed. We highlight diffs. All right, our button change. The text change, Applitools catches that. That's awesome. Applitools catches that with the baseline or the match level of strict. This is a really cool feature of Applitools. We can change the strictness of the algorithm. So for this instance, maybe a text change is warranted, right? Maybe there actually should be something that gets flagged when text changes, but maybe there's not. Maybe actually this should be okay. We can actually pass that with a couple different levels of testing. So right here, add to cart, buy now. It's basically the same thing. Nothing really changed crazy on the layout. It's just a text change for the most part. Nothing's going to fail here, which is awesome. So we'll cut down on those false positives. We can be really exact with it. Now, let's say we're doing more testing on it, and maybe we have different colors or something that will affect it. What we can do is actually go back to strict or leave it, and we can actually ignore the entire region, which is really cool. So we can come here, we're right here, ignore this region. And now any change that happens inside that, no matter our match level, will pass. So we can make all the changes we want, and nothing is ever going to get caught there. And one of the cool things that we can do is actually we can apply that to other steps in our scope. So what does that mean? Our scope is actually this test against all the browsers it possibly could be. So we have this against 3 different browsers. You can see this Safari 16, Safari 16. If we apply this, let's leave this here. If we do this, yeah. So now we're in Firefox. The problem actually still comes up. So this is a huge problem. Testing at scale visually with different localizations, with different browsers, there are so many results. Applitools AI is able to actually group those together. Oops. And apply these. Let's see if I can touch this. To all the different browsers. So if I click that button, apply to scope, it's going to go through. It's automatically going to apply those. Should work. Yes, now there is no problem, which is awesome. I don't have to individually go through each one. I now know the AI was working and applied all of those changes. So I can do something like click now accept. I'm actually, though, going to get rid of this ignore. And we're going to go back, delete everywhere. Let's Make sure that Pat heard that failed. All right, awesome. Okay, so now this is like a pretty, again, simple, I think, issue that comes up a lot, and we can definitely tell the difference between this. I think there's also some other aspects of visual testing that can really help out and find different bugs. Another one being accessibility testing. So here we can run accessibility tests against this particular test. Simply click this, and there's going to be a lot of problems here actually. So we have AAA level rating against 2.1 WCAG, WCAG. This is going to be really the most strict accessibility rules. And you can see here we have a lot of problems with our visual accessibility. If we zoom in, you can see most of it is based around the gray on white, right? So you can see here, so classification, this is a text. The status has failed, and that's because the contrast between that and the surrounding elements was too low. And you'll see that is common throughout this page. So what we can do is make those changes and rerun our test again and make sure that accessibility we're passing. Again, so this is a huge automation and game-changing aspect that we're able to run via visual testing. And then, so now that we have this, let's go back to that A/B testing we were talking about. So let's say this was an A/B test, and every time we ran our Cypress test, we were going to get something different. Let's actually add this up. Go create new. So now we're going to call this. We're going to call it variant. We're going to call it by now. All right, we're going to apply that against everything. And now we have two different baselines. We have a baseline that can be accepted against add to cart, or we have a baseline that can be accepted against buy now. And again, it's just a really easy way that you don't need to use code. You don't need to use technical skills to create logic around an A/B experiment. You can simply do all this within the tool. When this runs again, it should pass against that variant. So we'll kill two birds with one stone, save that. And then another example of the grouping is just we're going to pass this. Oh, it's already done in batch. There we go. All right, there we go. So now, because we grouped, we can apply this across the group. It's just the same bug on different browsers, right? So we shouldn't be looking at three different browsers, three different bugs. It's just we're looking at the same problem. So it's really nice to group these together. So one thing we're going to do is change actually the color of this price to show an example of a non-functional aspect that can actually really affect the outcome. So here again, we'll go to global CSS. Actually, no, we'll go here. We're going to change. Yeah, let's actually just double check. Yeah, price value, text color primary. So let's change this to the same as the background. We'll save that. All right. That's going to go through, and we'll catch again, we'll just see Applitools catch that problem and then show us in the dashboard in a way that, again, functional testing wouldn't be able to catch. The by now, these visual things that that are a little bit different than our traditional testing tools. We're still able to do traditional testing, but we're able to do so much more. We're able to do accessibility testing. We're able to do this visual testing as well. So let's see here. Should be getting quicker with a cache. Let's see if it's right on. Refresh. Nope. Hopefully I didn't clear the cache. All right, sweet. All right, awesome. No longer there. So again, if you were functionally testing for that element to be present, it's going to be present. The problem is the color is going to be changed, which is pretty superfluous for functional testing. I'm not going to lie. Like testing colors and things around that is pretty hard to maintain. So let's now see Applitools catch this. So I will click that Cypress button for the 5th time. All right, so that's going to run, and then we'll bring it over to let's just save that. All right, awesome. It definitely threw us an error. Sorry, it looks like my connection's a little slow. I apologize. All right, awesome. Just save that quick. Okay. All right, so now you can see that Applitools was able to see the difference. And actually, something that's really cool is it flags it here as obviously not showing up. Another really nice aspect, I think, of the Applitools dashboard is that we can root cause analysis. We can actually see what changed itself. So when we go here, we're going to see exactly the elements that were changed while we're in the tool. So you can see here color change from text color primary to actually the FFF white color that we're talking about. And again, it's amazing to see visual AI compare both the DOM itself and what's changing on the code level to visually what changed. And it really opens up a whole new layer of testing and testing without adding a ton of resources. All right, so then also just test. One before didn't save, I apologize. All right, and then the last thing I just wanted to talk about a little bit is the grouping around the multi maintenance. So just to quickly take you out of e-commerce mode quick and show you a better example. Let's see, sorry about this auto grouping. All right, here's an example and you can think about this as e-commerce, like landing page, right? Of just a web page that is very similar. We're not looking at different web page, or we're not looking at like different experience. We're looking at different particular landing pages with the same bug. And you can see we're looking at a logo missing. And this will happen oftentimes in e-commerce, right? Is like you don't want all of your products to flag the same problem because it's just really noisy. So if you have 100 different sneaker colors and variants, if the button is missing on the template, like I don't want 100 different errors because let's say 90 of them are due to that and the last 10 aren't. It just creates this false sense of confidence, I think, on your testing tools. So the grouping really makes all of this. So there's 76 different bugs. When we group this together, we're actually only going to get 2 different problems because it's not actually 76 different problems. The logo is missing on this web page that is all the same. Again, we recognize the template nature. And then same thing when we go here. It's it's a logo on this same application template now. We were able to see that the GitHub application and the GitHub marketing website had enough differences, but the logo between them is missing. So these 76 problems become just 2 problems for us to fix, which is huge, again, like we're talking about with e-commerce and its templated nature. All right, so that was 50 minutes of talking about how Applitools and Visual AI can solve your testing challenges this Black Friday. I really hope that you can see from our example how widely applicable all these small examples are to your e-commerce site. You'll be able to test pop-ups, be able to test different product sections, different category pages, all using Applitools and a simple automation tool like Cypress. I think Pam has some awesome resources for us to close out with, so we can start there. But thank you, everyone, for attending today.
All right. We do have a few questions that have come in, so we'll be taking those in just a moment. If you have other questions for Dan, please add them in the Q&A tab. But yes, Dan, if you'll bring up that slide, I'd love to tell everyone about, if you want to learn more about visual testing, there's a new course called The Basics of Visual Testing at Test Automation University. It's part of the visual testing learning path that include courses in many common languages and frameworks. Test Automation University, or TAU as we call it, is one of the web's most loved and respected providers of test automation learning and certification, and it's 100% free. I did put a link in the chat to take you to this Basics of Visual Testing course, but there are lots of others there. Please sort by framework, by topic, by learning path, and then this QR code also will take you right there as well. All right. So we had a question, Dan, about places to get additional learning. So we've already addressed that. We have another question. Let me bring that one up. I know you're focusing on web testing today, but can you use that contrast tool on mobile? Dan, I think you're muted.
Yep, sorry. You can use the contrast for all web mobile. So mobile web browser, it still works for. We are adding support for native mobile. So native mobile, we don't yet have support for across all devices, but web and web mobile we do today.
Okay. All right, we have another question. How would you approach visual testing if your layout is also dynamic, i.e. different sizes of tiles or components similar to Pinterest?
Okay, yeah, so that one, I would say the best way to do that is region, like really to divide it up in regions. So a really cool aspect, which actually I didn't show in the demo today, is the ability to not just look at things in components or look at things in a full page aspect, but you can also look at things in a regional aspect. So you can take a kind of a snippet around, let's say, a certain set of boxes that are certain sized, which is really, I think, helpful with something like Pinterest. You can just test around that. Also, though, in general, our layout algorithm is going to be able to catch some of that. So I would say definitely try it out just to see the difference between the algorithms. But regionizing your entire layout is probably going to be your best bet. It's going to be the middle ground between full page and components, and allow you a little bit of flexibility when testing those kind of pretty dynamic places.
Okay. Do you mind advancing the slide for us, Dan? I want to make sure everyone, if they have other questions, they can reach out to our team. All right, I see one more. Would visual testing still be helpful if my e-commerce site is going through a major rebrand or some other visual update?
Absolutely. So I would say this is one of the best parts about visual testing is the maintenance portion of it. So you saw before when I changed from add to cart to buy now, and I simply give it the thumbs up, the buy now button and every single other element that didn't change now becomes the new baseline and the new test itself with a click of a button. So there's no need to rewrite tests for different things or rewrite a bunch of tests for different elements that are moving. It's just simply an acceptance, right? It's just simply a thumbs up, a one click. So I think when we actually think about DOMs that are rapidly changing, and even products that are in beta that are still not fully fleshed out, I actually think visual testing with Applitools is a great solution for it, because you're not putting in a ton of overhead for something that's going to change, right? So you have your stuff today, and then you're rebranding it. Great. You're just simply going to go through, and in this way, you can kind of quickly manually look at changes, because we can really pinpoint things like colors, right? Like let's say your website layout wasn't going to change, but your colors were. We can flag those and show you just the things where the layout changed and not worry about the colors. Or you can look at things where just the color changed and kind of don't worry about the layout aspect. So I think from a visual aspect, it's really helpful to not only pinpoint and accelerate the manual testing of that, but also just in general, when creating new tests start to become as easy as a thumbs up, the way you think about testing and updating tests is just different. And I find that your test coverage and your propensity to create a new test for a new scenario, or again, like a whole new brand, it's just not as difficult.
All right. All right. Well, I don't see any other questions. So I do want to thank everyone for joining us today. And thank you, Dan, for an excellent session. As I mentioned earlier, be looking for an email tomorrow with a session recording. We'll also be sure to include a link to the repo that has all of the resources Dan mentioned, and as well as the slide deck. As Dan demonstrated, we have a number of solutions here at Applitools to help your team work smarter. If you would like to see how Applitools Eyes, UltraFresh Grid, Contrast Advisor, or just our complete platform in more detail, our testing specialists are ready to help. You can visit the Chat with Applitools table in the social lounge immediately following this live session, or you can schedule a time with one of our testing specialists by clicking the link that you'll see there in the chat. Again, thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you again at a future event.